Something that's not being talked about a lot in the astrology world, but should be, is the fact that Neptune is sitting at 29 degrees in the sign of Pisces for roughly 2 full years. Not only that, but it's going to be lingering near Saturn, which is an energy of limitation, restriction, and difficulty in the sign of Pisces throughout this entire period. And so, here to talk about this with me is Zoe Cardiff, who is a brilliant professional astrologer. She is a TikTok superstar, and she is a former student and graduate of the Cosmic Academy of Astrology, which is my full astrology course. Thank you so much, Zoe, for being here with us.
Thank you for having me again. I think this is my third time doing a forecast with you.
I think it is too. But for those who don't already know who you are, can you give us just a little bit of a background of how you got into astrology, what your style is like, and then we'll launch right into the Neptune stuff.
Yes, so I'm a professional astrologer. I've been practicing professionally for 4 years. I'm a traditional astrologer mainly, and I really focus on sort of compassionate, intuitive, personal readings with my clients. And I make almost daily videos online on Instagram and TikTok, kind of giving an update about the astro weather or just certain aspects in the natal chart, because what I really want to do is help other people to utilize in a real and practical way astrology and bring it down to earth a little bit more and give bite-sized pieces for free, of course, online so people can understand a little bit more.
Yeah, and I will link your TikTok down below. So you guys definitely follow her if you're on TikTok and on Instagram. Her short form content is like the best of the best. So a lot of stuff on TikTok when it comes to astrology, I talk about this a lot, but a lot of it is just complete nonsense. And so Zoe's on there elevating the astrology content. It's real astrology. And she does give readings too. So I'll link that because a lot of you, come to me asking for readings. I don't give them, publicly right now. If you want someone who has a similar style who will do a very amazing job, I know Zoe is that person. So we'll make sure that that's linked down below. Um, all right, so let's get into Neptune. So Neptune moved into that 29th degree in May of this year. So it's already there. We're already in it. The 29th degree is the anaretic degree. It's a very volatile place. And so what does that mean for the collective first?
So first, let's talk just about Neptune a little bit for those that don't know or are
Yeah.
need a bit of a refresher about Neptune. Neptune is a really interesting planet. It is sometimes it's a very nebulous planet. Even when I start to talk about Neptune, I don't know if you can like relate, my brain starts to go like into the clouds a little bit because Neptune on one spectrum is this planet of higher ideals, higher consciousness, the invisible thread that connects us all. Community and like higher love, and seeing things as we wish they could be, right? And so that's why Neptune rules like art and creativity, because we're able to kind of like move away from the logical, rational thought and step into something higher. But on that same level, Neptune also rules like illusion and delusion and maybe not secrets, but having your eyes opened or feeling like a bubble is bursting for you, like seeing feeling lied to or deceived or
Mhm.
deceiving others, it can Neptune clouds, it can cloud our judgment. And so there's definitely a spectrum of this planet. It rules like intoxication, drugs, alcohol, but also like leaving your consciousness. So meditation and creative expression. So there's definitely like a spectrum of Neptune.
Yeah, I always say Neptune just dissolves the boundaries of the physical in every conceivable way. And so wherever Neptune is hitting your chart, it's kind of dissolving the structures of what you believe to be real. And especially with Saturn in the mix, like that is going to be hardcore disillusionment.
For sure. And Neptune and Saturn they're like diametrically opposed, right? Like they're just so different because
Yeah.
Neptune is like um, kind of realizing that reality is an illusion and Saturn is reality. Neptune dissolves boundaries and Saturn is boundaries. So things can feel, um, a little bit confusing right now in that Pisces ruled area of your life. Neptune has been in Pisces since 2012, 2011.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, a long time. It's got a long cycle. And so one of my teachers, Catherine Urban, describes a Neptune transit as like, because it can be sneaky, smoking, and then all of a sudden being really high, where it's like, I didn't realize that was happening. And now here I am. Um, but yeah, so Neptune moving through the Pisces house, whole sign house in your chart, we could have been feeling more creative, more compassionate, more sensitized. Neptune
Mm.
sensitizes us. It makes us more perceptive in that area of life, but also and also drawn to sort of expanding our consciousness in that area, being very idealistic in that area. And then Saturn comes in. Saturn moved into Pisces in March of last year, and it's been kind of creeping up closer and closer to Neptune.
Mhm.
Now, they're within 10 degrees of each other. And so Neptune kind of Saturn brushes up against that Neptune and says, like, hey, face reality. Is this real? And you start to even maybe question your reality in that area of life. What's going on here? I've had a lot of clients, and myself included, that can feel like you're having experiences there in that Pisces area of life that feel like, is this really my reality? Making you question. And there can be a positive, like Neptune, Saturn, of being able to sort of like take that higher consciousness and those ideals and ground them into reality. But on the flip side, you can feel sort of like your reality is being demolished, and it can go either way. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. And especially with Neptune and Pisces, one of the things that people don't realize with modern astrology is that the rulerships are not rulerships, they're affinities. And so Neptune has an affinity for Pisces. And what I've noticed with the outer planets, when they are in the sign that they rule in modern astrology, which is again more of an affinity than a rulership, it tends to just bring more of that energy. It's like the Neptuniest Neptune energy that you could possibly experience. And the one thing I've noticed with Neptune, especially if it's hitting your planets while it's transiting wherever it's transiting, it makes you so sensitive, like hypersensitive. Like you are just a sponge and there are no boundaries. And no matter how hard you try, since Saturn's moved in, it's been a little better. But up until that point, it's like no matter how hard you try, everything is going to get to you. Everything's going to feel just you're going to feel it more. And one of the things I noticed too was when it opposed my sun, because I have a Virgo sun, that was a few years back. I started picking up on like weird vibes. Like all of a sudden, I'd get this fear, and like it would be like, what is happening? Is this my intuition? Am I going to die? Like, what is happening here? And I started to realize within a couple days that I would feel this intense like energy, a big world event would happen. I'd never had that experience before. It still happens now with Neptune at 29, but like less so. And it's more like, okay, this is actually a useful thing. But when it was right opposing my sun, it was like unbearable. I was like, what is going on? Like, I don't have anxiety. I'm not an anxious person. I don't have like an anxiety disorder or anything like that. And I would just suddenly get this like dread or fear, like something horrible was about to happen. And I thought it was like to me that it was about to
Right.
happen because I was like so much sensitivity. So anyway, that whole long story just to illustrate the point that with that Neptune and Pisces, we're going to be feeling things. And especially at the 29th degree, which is a degree that is transcending like two worlds, it's transcending two signs. It makes you much more open to things like that. People are going to be especially if they're already very empathic, very psychic, like sponges. And it's hard to know where that is coming from when you pick up on something.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, you said so many things that I wanted to comment on. If you have Neptune aspecting a natal planet, especially like a visible planet, that's even if you have like the most like grounded and logical and analytical chart or sun or moon or whatever, Neptune hitting that planet will really, really open you up and sensitize you and make you so much more emotive and maybe compassionate and sympathetic, but also you can feel sort of like, what is going on? Why am I crying all the time? Or why am I does my intuition feel so heightened? And it can be cool for sure, but it can also, lead to Neptune can bring anxiety and fear because we're
Hmm.
feeling things so much. And it's hard to kind of discern. Neptune is not, it is the opposite of discernment. It's hard to discern, like, is this my intuition? Is this anxiety? Is this real? Is this not? And it just can become very, very strange. Very
Yeah.
strange.
It's like
Um,
pure and unadulterated sensation, and that's it.
Yes, yes. And that's why it's so good for like losing yourself in a creative pursuit or meditation or finding religion or spirituality, things that where the logical mind is like a hindrance, but and you want to step into those emotions. But anything that, if you're having a hard Neptune transit or an intense Neptune transit and you have to kind of like get yourself together, it can feel sort of, you can feel off kilter a little bit for
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
Rally.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is going to be at 29 degrees for this entire time. So we should probably talk a little bit more about the 29th degree and kind of
Yes.
what that looks like. And also this dance, because we're going to be dipping into Aries a little bit and then dipping back out and then dipping in and dipping back out, especially, let's see, it starts to happen in 2026 is when it goes into Aries, but it starts to actually go into Aries in 2025. So March through May of 2025.
Yeah, yeah. It's this, and in 2025, we have a lot of the outers doing that. We have like Uranus dipping into Gemini, we have Saturn dipping into Aries, and I think it's gonna like go back for a little bit into, so there's a lot of this sort of like one foot in, one foot out. But the 29th degree is a critical degree. It's an anaretic degree. And it's a degree of urgency. For like when planets are at 29, we can feel like there's this urgent the sense of urgency because the planet is about to, whatever the time scale is, it is about to move into the next sign. And so we can sort of feel like an energy of extremes, and that planet's energy can intensify. We can feel like we're at a crisis point or a turning point,
Yeah.
depends, but some sort of like crossroads or
Like we're
something like.
running out of time.
Yes, yes, exactly. And that's where this urgent energy can come up. And I talked earlier about how Neptune it can be a bit of a sneaky transit, especially because it kind of rules these, even as we're talking about it, it's all these sort of nebulous, high stuff that happens internally. Oftentimes it's not an external expression, but when Neptune is at 29 degrees, it becomes a little bit more real. We can feel it becomes more intense, and therefore we can feel that Neptune transit more, coupled with the fact that its proximity to Saturn, which is like the reality planet, is closer than it's ever been. Saturn right now is at 19 degrees Pisces and Neptune is at 29. So that 10 degrees is the closest that they've been in this sign. And so both of those things together, like this really, really intensifies, amps up the urgency, amps up the this feeling of transition potentially, or like having pivotal realizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that none of us has ever experienced in
Right.
our lifetime and won't experience again in our lifetime
Right.
because the Neptune transit is 100 and is it 184 years or 100 and
64,
something along those
something like
lines.
that.
I
A
should
long
have it
time.
written down, but it's yeah, it's longer than anyone lives.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we
So,
don't have like a context for how this feels in our own lives.
right.
It's a new experience for all of us.
For sure. And that's the thing about the outer planet transits is a lot of times when we're looking at other planets, you can, because astrology is the study of cycles, and so when you're with a client or when you're just trying to figure out what to expect from a certain transit, you look back to the last time it happened, but Neptune, being that it is, like Uranus and like Pluto, sort of a transpersonal generational planet,
Hmm.
we can look back at time periods in history,
Hmm.
but not in our own personal lives. So it can always kind of feel like almost a little bit of like wild card energy. Like we have never experienced this before, personally.
And have you looked into some of the previous events that have happened the last time Neptune was at this point?
Yes. I know that I found two things to be really interesting. Number one was, I believe the Communist Manifesto was written in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And when Neptune, around the time it was discovered, or the last time Neptune was in Pisces, and which makes sense because Neptune is this planet of higher ideals and universal love and um,
And dis
togetherness.
delusions.
For sure. Yeah, it's
Like
never worked.
this was this idealistic thing and it sounds really great in
Yes,
practice and then you implement it and then things happen that are not
right.
necessarily aligned with what people intended. So, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, that's such a Neptunian thing. And it's like, oh, it's this compassionate, wonderful thing. And then it turns into like the worst case scenario.
exactly. Every time it's been used. But the book, I've peeked at it. It's very flowery, and
Yeah.
you read and you're like, wow, this is this is the ideal world that I'd love to be like in. It sounds like heaven, but that bubble burst. And then also I believe that the Salem witch trials happened the last time Neptune was in Pisces.
Oh, interesting.
And that kind of makes sense because it deals with these sort of like unseen forces and witchcraft and things like, not that Neptune rules witchcraft, but just sort of like um the being overcome by, spirit or, a ghost or whatever. And then also this like sort of collective decision that these people were, you know, witches or
Collective delusion.
evil. Collective delusion, exactly. Collective
Yeah.
delusion, which led them to make this decision as a town or village to burn these people, you know? And so that,
It's all like cult like mentality. And one of the things I talked about with Neptune moving into Pisces, and especially when Saturn came into the mix, was like an energy around cults and cult activity. And
yeah,
what we've seen in the media are like a million documentaries about cults. Like all of a
yes.
sudden it just like went crazy around this time period. So yeah, that's kind of another interesting thing. It's not necessarily to do with the last time Neptune was in Pisces, but it's definitely to do with Saturn being in Pisces and co-present with Neptune.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Also just with this Neptune and Pisces transit, we can look back and see like some of the really great things that happened. Gay marriage was legalized, I believe, while Neptune was in Pisces. And
Yes.
yeah, which is, you know,
I think
compassion.
pretty shortly after it moved into Pisces.
Yeah, because it was like at that 2011, 2012 period. I believe it was 2011. I have it
I think
written
it
down.
was 2013. Yeah, I think it was like 2013 and 2014 actually.
When it was legalized, and then Neptune had moved into Pisces shortly before, either
Yeah, I
2000.
think it was like 2010, like it moved into Pisces.
Okay, yeah, because I think there was probably like a in, out, in
Yeah.
that. Also, something like small, but I think is very Neptunian is like binge watching became a thing, you know, like losing
Yeah.
yourself, just watching Netflix for like 12 hours, you know, or whatever. And, you know, everyone just started binge watching things. The internet scammers, IG scammers in the spiritual community, Neptune and Pisces, you know,
Yeah.
pretending to be someone else and deceiving and deluding other people. And you're totally right with the cults, not only just people getting more interested in cults, but like these new cults and a lot of like very Piscean like yoga cults and
Yeah.
spiritual like influencer kind of culty activity.
And
So yeah,
that's like it's like this blurred line between like what is a cult nowadays with like modern society and the internet and like these online communities because it used to be that kind of what defined a cult was like everyone was living together and they were isolated by intention, by design from the rest of society, like within this sort of community. And now we can still do that amongst ourselves in our homes with our online communities. And so there are these like cults that are not really cults, but they're kind of cults and they're spread out everywhere.
yeah. Even our everything feels kind of culty and tribal and
Yeah.
sort of like this is our reality. You can have your reality over there. Everyone's got their own. And I think that that speaks to Neptune and Pisces as well as like of course like amplified with Saturn in Pisces too.
And was it Neptune and Pisces? I'm looking this up right now because just
Look
to
it up.
refresh myself. But Neptune and Pisces was around the time of the Civil War too, the American Civil War.
I think that you might be right.
Yeah, so it was literally when tensions were building around the American Civil War, and then that's what it was. When Neptune entered Aries, that's like when it was going back and forth between two signs. That's actually when the Civil War began. So, like, literally right now, we're in the exact same placement over these next 2 years that we
Mm,
were in during the American Civil War. Like, that is the cycle that's coming full circle here as we're dancing between Pisces and Aries.
very interesting. And Uranus is going to move into Gemini next year, or at least begin. And I believe Uranus was in Gemini during the Civil War and the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and World War II.
Yeah. So I think during the well, around the time of the American Revolution, it was in Taurus, and then it moved into, I think, Gemini for the Civil War or something like that. I'd have to double check. Anyway,
Yeah, there's a lot of cycles that are you know, coinciding right now. But it is interesting just looking back at straight up the Neptune and Pisces current and also into the past. And in your own life to kind of do some journaling and some writing because again sometimes it can be hard to conceptualize, but I do think that Saturn's closeness to Neptune really does help kind of drive the point home as far as like what your Neptune and Pisces transit has been sort of like showing you or teaching you or bringing up for you. And this Neptune getting to 29 degrees of Pisces, it really does represent like the culmination or the beginning of the end of Neptune's journey through Pisces. And so it makes, you
yeah.
know, this storyline much more heightened and amplified for sure. And I'm sure
Well,
that people can kind of see if they look, you know, what's been activated for them.
And like what you can see too is kind of like what story began around 2010, 2011
Mhm.
that is coming to this culmination or coming to this ending point that you're having like maybe a crisis of having to let go of it. And I say story very intentionally because with with Neptune, it might literally be a story. Like what
Yeah,
illusion, what delusion, what story has been going on in this area of your life that is not real and maybe you're kind of moving on from it.
right. Yeah. And you feel that you need to move on from it. And Saturn can really help with that, you know? And we have this really beautiful full moon on the 21st that's in Capricorn at 29 and a nice sextile to Neptune in
It
Pisces.
is in a nice sextile. I actually just did a video. It'll be posted last weekend when this
Okay.
one comes out. So you guys
Okay.
can watch that if you haven't, because it's still relevant. It was like a major activation of this energy for sure.
It will have been a definite major activation and a helpful activation to kind of get things moving, and to have connected to some kind of like, healing practice or just letting go, releasing, being okay with releasing, with whatever Neptune is asking you to kind of release either and let go of and move away from, either in your like something physical or like you said, like a storyline or an illusion or a delusion, that just you realize um, isn't helpful,
Yeah,
anymore.
absolutely. Is there anything else we really need to cover before we start talking about the forecast for all 12 signs, which I know people are super excited for?
Yeah, I don't want to make them wait too long. Just basically, like in summary, Neptune and Saturn together in Pisces can have you questioning or confused about the structures of your life, in that Pisces ruled area. You could be having experiences that make you question, is this sustainable? Do I want, to continue to build in this way, internally or externally?
Yeah.
Do I want to make some changes? And the truth is starting to come to the surface for a lot of us. And even if it feels like hard or difficult to face, you're supported in facing it and making necessary adjustments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good note to transition on. And so, for those of you who are maybe new to the all sign forecast or aren't already aware, you definitely want to listen for your rising sign, your sun sign, and your moon sign to get a more holistic overview of the energy for the next really 2 years ahead. And so, your rising sign is the most predominant energy. It's going to show up most literally, especially in physical manifestation. The sun sign will be secondary, and then the moon sign is important to listen to as well. Although for most people, this is going to be more internalized and subjective. And so make sure you listen to all three. Don't just jump all the way ahead. And so let's get started with Aries and Aries rising.
Yeah, so for Aries and Aries rising, Neptune has been transiting your 12th house. And I feel like Neptune likes to be in the 12th house. I mean, it's a house of rest and restoration and sort of connectedness to the unseen. And so Neptune transiting, at 29 degrees of your 12th house, along with Saturn, potentially there's some like mental health or personal development or just like internal work that you've been doing that you recognize you need to change course, or you have some pivotal realizations that kind of like open your mind to maybe new processes or practices or new forms of therapy or new forms of connection or ways to restore yourself that are sort of coming to the surface, and there, if you haven't been doing any Neptune in the 12th house can give you like really like interesting prophetic dreams, downloads, insights, when it comes to that kind of stuff. But if you haven't been sort of paying attention to this, Neptune at 29 along with Saturn can make your those things feel stronger, fears, anxieties, stuff that you've kind of pushed swept under the rug or put into a closet. That's the 12th house. It's the things that we hide from ourselves or that are hidden from us. And so you can be sort of confronted with some of this if you haven't been kind of shining a light. And if you had, you can feel sort of like you're on your way, and there can even be an urgency potentially to get it done, to do the work, and feel like, okay, like I got this. I know what I need to work on. If that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And the other thing, too, that I might add is that with Saturn and Neptune, the co presence in
Mhm.
Pisces, that has left a lot of people who are Aries rising feeling isolated.
Oh yeah.
Saturn in the 12th house brings this isolation, and that Neptunian component is like, I don't know why this is happening. I don't know what to do with this energy.
Right.
And that can be difficult and unnerving and obviously isolating because you are isolated. Like it forces you to be more with yourself and more in solitude. And so this co-presence kind of continues like on and off as it dips into Aries and dips back into Pisces through 2026.
Right.
But it's kind of like this is the end of it. So you're kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And maybe you're starting to see what this meant for you and what you kind of could have created or could still create out of this space. Like maybe you're thrown into this situation for a reason and you don't really realize until like now you're finally starting to see like, okay, I'm seeing a break in this and it's also helping me to get perspective.
For sure. Yeah. And Saturn joys in the 12th house. Like it can feel like a lonely and isolating transit with Saturn in the 12th, but it's been asking you to like unpack, to shed, to
Mhm.
release. Like that's the point. It's not just to make you feel lonely and isolated just because, to punish you, you know? And so you can start, like you said, seeing the light at the end of that tunnel. And then when Saturn and Neptune enter, a 12th house transit is always there, what I think it to prepare you for a first house transit, you know, for these planets to move into your first house. You're able to kind of like take what you have learned through this long shedding process and utilize it like in your day to day, in your relationships, at your job, in a way where you feel like you have a handle on it. Like I've learned all of this and now I'm able to kind of make changes. It's like an inside job right now. And then when Saturn and Neptune move into Aries, it can feel more like, all right, I've changed my inside and now it's time for all the external stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what about for Taurus and Taurus rising?
For Taurus and Taurus rising, this is happening in the 11th house of friends, groups, community, and also hopes and dreams. And so having, you know, Neptune in your 12th, I'm sorry, in your 11th, maybe you're really thinking about or have really been thinking about your Neptune in the 11th can bring up, especially intensified by Saturn, questions of like, where do I belong? You know, am I happy with my community and the people that I surround myself with by choice? You know, that's the 11th house. And
Mhm.
so sometimes, especially early in the transit, it can feel sort of like you can feel like you don't belong anywhere or you're dissatisfied with the people that are in your life and sort of questioning like, do I want to continue to spend time on these people. And oftentimes with Neptune transiting the 11th, you can sort of be making or wanting to make more spiritual friends, more creative friends, especially if those are things that you are into, or even if you weren't before, now you can be, you know? And so with this Neptune at 29 and with Saturn here, you could have like reached a critical point where maybe you have to set some boundaries with the people you've come to realizations that certain people are for you. You want to spend your time, Saturn on them. You want to nurture those relationships. And, you know, you can be sort of like slapped in the face with like, oh yeah, this person just doesn't give me what I need, you know, and you can feel sort of like the time is now to either set boundaries or to cut ties. And it can feel sort of like pertinent, urgent, got to do it now.
And yeah, because like Neptune transiting the 11th could be gathering a lot of friendships without any sort of discernment.
Right. Yeah.
And also just feeling so compassionate and empathic toward other people, especially the people that are in your social circle, to the point where you guilt yourself into doing things that you don't necessarily want to do. Because that's another signification of Neptune is
Yes.
this sense of guilt and obligation that you feel, usually because it heightens your sensitivity toward others. And
Mhm.
it causes you to do things that maybe are not in your best interest or maybe are enabling for other people. And this would be the time to kind of like cut that.
Definitely. And with the 11th house being like humanitarianism, you know, and like wanting to help everyone. And maybe you've been like attracting strays, like, um, you know, and sort of realizing like, oh my God, all the things that I'm doing or all my time is spent on others, you know? And even
Mhm.
with Saturn there, with Saturn retrograde, you're really starting to rethink your responsibilities and commitments to
Mhm.
these people. So yeah, I think that that's probably the biggest takeaway here.
Absolutely. And then for Gemini and Gemini rising up in the 10th house.
Okay, so this is big. If you okay, so the 10th house is an important house no matter what. The 10th house is the house of career, public life, public image, legacy, you know, what you're leaving behind. A lot of times it has a lot to do with career. And a lot of people have their midheaven here. And so with Neptune transiting the 10th at 29 degrees, I mean, this could have really been anytime we have like an angular transit, first, seventh, 10th. And fourth, we feel it more strongly. You know, maybe you're questioning or have been questioning your career path and what
Mhm.
you do and how you do it and how you're seen. And there can be this desire to kind of like drop out of public view, or totally separate from what you were doing before, a feeling of disillusionment, and maybe those things have been simmering beneath the surface, and now is a time to make a change, or maybe you have made that change and you're kind of just settling into a new role, and it very much, I think, this is one of those transits and activations that changes a lot for a person, because not only your working career and your goals and direction, but also like how you're seen and how you want to be seen. Neptune to the angles can very much feel like an identity crisis,
Mhm.
and Saturn, of course, here, along with Neptune, is making these things more real and can help you plan and plot and make necessary adjustments, especially since Saturn is retrograde, you know. I'm sure it's been an interesting transit for Gemini risings. You can feel this urgency to make a shift or to make a tweak or a change to some changes that you've already made in this area of life.
Yeah, but there's like a lot of confusion about what that means. It's like there's a
Yeah,
sense of like something needs to change here. Like the structures of your career or your public reputation, your legacy, what you're putting out into the world, that's dissolved. And
right,
like it's like you're in this like goo. It's like you're it's like you're in that cocoon, like when the caterpillar like dissolves into the goo, but like
right,
what does the goo turn into? Like you don't know yet. If you were just to open that cocoon, it would just be like mush and
right.
nothing would ever form. Like it's premature.
Yeah,
So like right now you're kind of at that end phase of the cocoon where everything is still goo, but it's starting to kind of turn into a butterfly a little
right.
bit here and there. And like it's hard to know exactly what that's turning into still. Like maybe there's like part of a wing and like an eye, but like what the hell is that? I don't know.
Yeah. And try not to get, if you're in this cocoon goo, try not to get, it's a great, it's very Neptunian, like really conjures up an image. But if you're in this space, try not, if you feel yourself getting like anxiety and fearful, another thing Neptune can do, especially when we don't know what to expect, is we can be very fearful of the future and of, what's coming. I don't know. But this is all part of the process. And I think the closer that Saturn gets to Neptune and the more we even move into this Neptune at 29 degrees, like it becomes more clear, it becomes more clear for you
Absolutely. And then for Cancer and for Cancer rising up in the ninth house, what
in the
does that
ninth
look like?
house. So I feel like Neptune at 29 degrees of the ninth house, you could be very much questioning your beliefs. The
Mhm.
ninth house is like our macro level belief systems about like spirituality, politics, our social, like societal beliefs, like how we see the world, is kind of the ninth house. With Neptune at 29, you could be maybe you've been on some journey of like getting more into spiritual ritual and exploring different, maybe religions or spiritual disciplines, just ways of seeing the world. And now Neptune at 29 can be very much like maybe you're at a crisis point, where it's sort of like, well, what do I believe? Then Saturn is there sort of maybe bursting a bubble. You thought that this guru or this political belief was going to save you, was the one. And you could maybe be realizing like, I don't know, I'm not sure. I have to go back to the drawing board here. I think that um, it can definitely be sort of playing out for people, and also just straight up questioning your beliefs, your attitudes, and beliefs that come from like childhood, that come from, it can be like this feeling of needing to unlearn a lot, or in the process of unlearning and confronting maybe delusions or storylines that you've been telling yourself that just aren't, you realize like, no, this isn't helping me. It's not true, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that Neptune, like in trine with the ascendant, really very gradually and gently like softens you. And I mean softens you more like not physically, but like more emotionally and psychologically, where you become more attuned to everything and much more compassionate and much more sensitive. And a lot of that could be due to the fact that you have gone through this period of spiritual or religious exploration, of philosophical exploration that's a little bit more esoteric, a little bit more spiritual than maybe you would have otherwise been doing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And you're right to bring up that trine to the ascendant, because you can also be feeling much more intuitive and connected to we need logic and fact, of course, but when you kind of drop into maybe meditation or journaling, or even like walking, moving meditation, you can feel like you get your best insights at that in those times, when you kind of transcend to the logical mind and connect to your intuition.
Yeah, definitely.
Having
Um,
spiritual experiences through travel, or while you're traveling, or traveling for the
yeah,
sole purpose, going on like a yoga retreat or
like a
going to
pilgrimage.
Yes, yes, exactly. Like those kinds of things. Maybe they've been happening for you. Maybe you want to do that, and this is your sign. But that would be really nice.
Yeah, so go on your pilgrimage before 2026.
Yeah, you have time.
And then for Leo and for Leo rising, this is an eighth house energy, which is kind of an interesting one.
It is definitely an interesting one. The eighth house being sort of well, the eighth house rules a lot, but it can bring up themes of like what's mine, what's yours, what's ours. And this can be like practically like money, of course, money and resources, but also like on an intimate level, you could be sort of going through maybe a I don't want to say crisis point and get people scared, but just sort of like a turning point or a point of realization where it's like, are my relationships equitable? My business, my working relationships where money is shared, my intimate relationships where like emotion and other things are shared, and there can be this sort of almost critical turning point and point of realization. There can be, I mean, just straight up, it could be feeling confused about your finances or crises around money internally. What am I saving? What am I making? What am I spending? Am I spending too much? Like just not even thinking about very Neptunian, like allowing my judgment to be clouded when I'm spending, and now I'm in all this debt. Maybe you want to pay off debt. Saturn sort of like getting so close to that Neptune, it can I think it can help, to kind of get more serious about these things and make necessary adjustments. Also, the eighth house is deep inner healing. And so maybe you've been on like a deep, dark,
Yeah.
intense healing journey and like alternative forms of healing, right? So it can be like maybe getting into astrology, or you've been diving really deeply into tarot or like EMDR, what are other like all to psychedelics and microdosing, anything, so that could have been something that you've been doing and maybe getting a lot of um transcending some of your issues from. Maybe it's time to switch it up though, maybe it's time to try a different avenue. Maybe you're having some really wild and really deep and really intense realizations that feel hard to deal
Yeah.
with but are necessary.
Well, and especially at that 29th degree, kind of going back to that sensitivity and like the significations of the eighth house. The eighth house is a house where our fears lie and our anxieties lie, usually due to past experiences and things like that. So it shows us what we're afraid of and how our traumas are controlling us in the present moment. And
Mm.
so at this 29th degree, it almost feels to me like it's this like last chance to deal with your stuff, and that
Mhm.
stuff has probably become more enmeshed with everything else in a way that's confusing and hard to pin down and hard to understand over the course of this period until Saturn came into the mix, right? And then it's like, now this is more concrete. I can see it, I can understand it. But if you haven't been dealing with it, I could see a lot of people having this crisis where all of a sudden they're having more like intense fear, intense dread, intense anxiety. And that's a cue that there's something that you need to get help with, because this is the house of like therapy and psychology and, you know, kind of going deeper and finding the deeper core of what it is that's causing these sensations and these feelings, so that they're no longer controlling the way that you behave in reality in the present moment.
Yeah, yeah, the eighth house is the house of like analyzing oneself, either being analyzed, or sort of like, doing some personal development work. But yeah, I think that that's right on the money. And with Saturn moving into that eighth house, it does help to sort of sharpen your understanding. Again,
Mhm.
even if it's hard, of like what is causing these feelings, these fears, these intimacy issues, to come up.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and then for Virgo and for Virgo rising, this is happening in your seventh house. Fun transit for Virgos.
Very fun, very long transit to have Neptune in the seventh house, another angular house. No matter when you were born, the descendant is always going to be in the seventh house. And so, yeah, the seventh house is the house of serious relationships, romantic, business, very, very close friendship, client work, contractual agreements. So with Neptune moving through the seventh house, especially at 29 degrees, there can be maybe some disillusionment, need to set boundaries with the people in your life. And you could very much be looking at the contracts. And this can be like contracts like business contracts, but also just, contracts that you are engaged in. in your close interpersonal relationships, you know? And it can bring up a lot of questions or could have been bringing up a lot of questions like, who do I choose? What are the dynamics and what are my patterns, you know, and sort of recognizing potentially what needs to change. And this has been something that's been going on. And maybe you've been meeting, you know, on um, another level, maybe you've been meeting like close friends and gotten into a relationship with people that make you feel more spiritual, where there's a deep or
Mhm.
high-minded spiritual connection, or there's a lot of healing. But also it could have been like a transit where at points you felt maybe deluded or deceived or victimized or giving more than you were getting in, you know, these relationships. And now that Neptune's at 29, it's sort of like, well, how much work have I done here? Or do I still have people in my life that I feel like are taking advantage of me, taking advantage of my kindness? Um, if so, then it can feel sort of there can be this urgency to make, you know, the necessary adjustments. Whether that's saying goodbye. And also with Saturn here, you can start to really, really be looking and saying, like, are these relationships sustainable? You know, do they feel solid and long lasting? You know, am I deluding myself in any of these partnerships? What do I need to do about that? You know, maybe the status of certain relationships still feels a little ambiguous and confusing. And that's okay. You know, if you don't know what to do, do nothing. But it's definitely sort of highlighting the status of all of your relationships. And the ones that feel confusing, like more information will come if you continue to kind of like ask yourself these questions, do the writing, talk to your friends, whatever it is. But you're being asked to kind of like do that last weeding out, is what I think.
Yeah, and I love that suggestion of like asking your friends and maybe getting like a third party involved because the biggest thing you'll see with Neptune transiting the seventh house, and I'm sure you've seen this with your clients, is wearing these crazy rose-colored glasses about your relationships. Like they'll describe a relationship to you and it sounds like the worst thing. I'm like, this dude sounds horrible, but you know, you're not saying that out loud, but you're like, Jesus Christ. And like they're like, yeah, and he's so wonderful. And you know, he stole my car and he
Right.
spent all my money and he just sits at home on the couch, but he's so sweet. And like, you know, when you get to the end of this transit, it's kind of like a wake up call if you haven't had that from these relationships. And maybe it is time, like, if you're starting to feel that, to like ask your friends, like ask your family, ask people that you trust, like what they really feel. Because if they haven't spoken up, this is the time.
Right. Yeah, let those people be like your Saturn transit, be your
Yes.
reality. And the other thing that I wanted to mention about this transit is sometimes with Neptune transiting the seventh, especially at 29 degrees, like maybe you have someone in your life that is like an addict or has mental health issues,
Mm,
or, you know, that you maybe haven't been wanting to address, you know, those things with them. Um, Maybe your partner is having like a hard time, you know, with their mental health, or, you know, there can be some thing that comes up, you know, regarding not just you, but like a close person in your life where you have to kind of, you know, show up for them or set boundaries with them, you know,
yeah,
if it's too much for you.
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, And then for Libra and Libra rising, that is in their sixth house, which is the house of health. And Neptune is my least favorite planet to deal with when it comes to medical astrology and health, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I could imagine because I don't practice medical astrology, not yet, but Neptune clouds and confuses, and that's not what you want when it comes to anything related to like health and medical, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You'll see a lot of weird nebulous symptoms that come and go and that doctors can't pin down, that they can't diagnose. You'll see things like misdiagnosis. It's just very hard to know what the hell is going on. Like, you know, something is happening and you're having these things go on in your physical body. And so you'll see Neptune at play a lot with these like chronic conditions that are very prevalent and they're like an epidemic in our modern society, like chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, like things where it's hard to diagnose. It's hard to understand what is going on. Like the doctors still have no idea like what causes any of this. And some of them don't even think it's real, which is very Neptunian.
Yes.
Um, so that's in, you know, so some people who have the Libra rising, they might be dealing with these types of things right now. And if that's the case, just know at that energetic degree, you might start to get answers and find the right practitioners. And you always have to look to alternatives when you have Neptune involved.
Yeah, I was thinking before you said fibro, I was thinking like PCOS, fibromyalgia, like things that don't show up on tests. but that you feel the symptom, or, there is no test for that specifically. There's the test for the symptoms, and, it's like a amalgamation of symptoms or whatever, but it would make sense that it's conditions that are hard to pin down and confusing, potentially hard to treat, or different for everybody. And so I wonder if some Libra risings have been, yes, experiencing some of those things, and even just some confusion around the general like health, even if it isn't something like a chronic illness.
Yeah.
But, you know, um, we're having to maybe make constant or like frequent adjustments to how you're taking care of yourself, because one thing is working for a little bit and then it's like, well, this isn't working anymore. I got to try something else. Um,
Yeah, it's like you don't know why.
right.
It's like this just isn't working and now this is and then this isn't. It's like there's fluctuation and there's like a lack of understanding of why. Also,
Right.
you're going to be way more physically sensitive with Neptune in the sixth house.
Mm,
So, vitamins, supplements, pharmaceutical medications, take your medications if your doctor says so. This isn't medical advice, but you're going to be more likely to have side effects from even things that are normally benign or that you've never had issues with before, or foods that you've never had issues with before, with Neptune transiting your sixth house. I mean, and this doesn't just impact your health, it impacts like your work and your
yeah.
relationships at work. And like, let's get into a little bit of that.
For sure. Yeah. I was definitely thinking that Neptune through the sixth, like you could be having a hard time, or could have been having a hard time, like sticking to a routine, because the sixth house is like what we do every day. It's like the meat and potatoes of our day. It's definitely connected to work, our day to day at work, our relationship with coworkers, but even just keeping like a solid and stable routine could have been feeling, harder, sticking to schedules and routines. And then also, yeah, maybe, because the sixth house rules coworkers, maybe like your the roster of coworkers that, or if you hire people, if you're a boss, maybe the people that you're working with or that are working for you are like coming in and out, aren't are transient,
Mm.
are unreliable, or that can be a manifestation of this as well.
But also maybe incorporating spirituality and rest and
Hmm.
imagination and all these wonderful Neptunian things into your work and into your day-to-day reality and habits. And that
Yeah.
could be something that could be really beautiful with this. And at the 29th degree, it's kind of like your last chance to start integrating that before Neptune moves on.
Yeah, definitely. I actually have a client, she won't mind me saying this. She was a nurse, like an RN, and in the last like month with Neptune since it's been at 29 degrees with Saturn there really saying like, look at this, look at how you feel here. She started a holistic healthcare practice.
Oh,
She quit being a
wonderful.
nurse. Yeah, and maybe she's doing the nurse part-time, but like really she started getting interested in holistic healing and teas and tinctures, and not like denying modern medicine, but it like incorporating that, the
Mhm.
holistic healing, and then helping her friends drink this tea, do this, do that. And then she started her own business. So, potentially having Neptune transit your sixth, you've been also interested in sort of the Eastern medicine, again, like teas and herbs and things like that. Um,
Mhm.
and even like animal sixth house rules animals, maybe like this would be a great time if you're wanting to get more, because you do still have some time. You can feel like this is my last chance. I really want to maybe get more into sort of alternative forms of like healing myself. Equine therapy, if I said that right, or like,
Yeah.
going to anything that is sort of getting a dog or a
Yeah.
cat. um
Or rescuing animals because it's that
yes.
compassionate energy of Neptune mixed with animals and pets.
Definitely. I think that that could be a really nice manifestation of this. And I love when you said like prioritizing like rest more in like your day to day, rest, drinking water, meditation, just like giving yourself some. Our society is so like grind mode,
Yeah.
girl boss. And maybe that's been you sort of saying like, oh, maybe I'm just gonna like take a little bit of a turn my emails off on the weekend, or just try to in whatever way to focus on rest and restoration rather than the constant grind.
Yeah, definitely. And then Scorpio and Scorpio risings. We have two Scorpio risings here. So
The best.
what do you see for us?
So for some Scorpio risings, because the fifth house is another one of those houses that rules several things. Your dating life could have been quite interesting if you're a person that's been dating and, been more interesting. for sure recently or over, with this transit. And I think that very much this Neptune at 29 degrees, as it's been getting here, along with Saturn, for the last year, really strengthening, changing the way that you show up in like your dating life and the kinds of people that you want to date and let in and be intimate with and things like that, like setting clear boundaries and rewriting the story around like the types of people that you will give your time, energy, attention, intimate, energy to. And I think like making those necessary changes can feel, because for some, maybe your dating life has felt confusing or strange, or, you um, can't find the right person. I've read for a lot of Scorpio risings that are like, I'm dating, but I'm just not finding anyone. I keep dating the same guy over and over, same girl. And it's like, well, yeah, it's time to kind of like switch that up. There could also be, you could be at this turning point when it comes to something with your children or family planning, or making a decision as far as like, do I want to have kids? Do I not want to have kids? What am I doing here? That kind of thing can feel, and maybe your child is going through a significant period or turning point or transition in their life that you have to hold space for.
Or like an
Um,
identity crisis.
oh yeah, for sure. Definitely. And
Yeah.
so I think, and this can also be a really nice energy, of course, of like maybe wanting to go all in on like a creative project,
Yeah.
or like a passion project, a hobby. And maybe you've been with Neptune in the fifth, like more creative, and giving yourself more time to do that. I found that Saturn transiting the fifth is kind of a bummer, because it's like, Neptune has been,
Playtime's over.
yeah, it literally, and Neptune in the fifth is sort of like, I want to play, I want to have fun, I want to date around or just try new things and try on different hobbies for size. And that's been cool. But then Saturn comes in and, last year, and it's sort of like play, like you said, playtime's over, you got to work. And Saturn through the fifth can always kind of feel like a bummer, I think, but especially like it with that co-presence with Neptune, there's like, well, I want to do this and I want to have fun and I want to party and whatever. And Saturn is like, no, 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 you have to kind of um, take care of what needs to be taken care of. So that can be another energy that's kind of playing out for Scorpio risings as well.
Yeah. And like the fifth house is the house of our hobbies, our interests, the things that we do because we love to do them. And one of the things for me since like 2010, 2011, especially, I was very not about these types of things, but I started getting really into like the paranormal and like, I had my very first actual like paranormal experience shortly after that. There was like a lot going in my chart, but it like opened my mind to like the fact that, oh, these things are possible. These things are actually real. I've experienced it tangibly in real life, like an actual poltergeist experience where it's like undeniable, like something was thrown across the room. That's not, that's like not something that you can come back from and be like, oh, I have a rational, logical explanation for that. And
Right.
so that got me on this like tangent of like my favorite things to do in my spare time are listen to podcasts about like Bigfoot and all of these like weird cryptozoology things. And I watch shows about like, hunting the paranormal and ghosts. And and that just came to mind when we were talking about this because I was like, that's totally Neptune transiting my fifth
Yeah.
house. It's like getting into all these things that are like interdimensional and beyond our reality that are very strange. Um,
Yeah.
and so, maybe there's something with that you've been kind of diving into, and maybe you've gone too far, or maybe, you've gone too far into the realm of fantasy because a lot of people in the fifth house, even just having Pisces in your fifth house, will make you prone to enjoying like things like fantasy novels and like fantasy shows or like things that like take you out of normal reality.
Right.
And so maybe you've gone too far out of normal reality and you need to kind of like rein it back in that 29 degree is there, or maybe you're just going to have maybe you'll have a poltergeist at 29 degrees.
Maybe. You know what else I was thinking is that maybe this could be like with Neptune at 29, like quitting drinking or like
Yeah.
eating sugar or anything that because yes, with Pisces ruling the fifth, we can be prone to escapism, and that can take many forms. But yeah, I mean, I think that potentially some people could maybe cut their calorie intake, anything that you recognize has been kind of going off the rails, with Neptune transiting your fifth. Um, with it being at 29 degrees, it brings you to this point where it's like, well, maybe I should cut some of this out, maybe it's
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, definitely. And then for Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising, this is in the fourth house. So kind of like a dissolving of maybe the family structure, your home life. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it could definitely be that dissolving of what you once thought, like what home means to you. You know, it can be changing for sure. I think that the need for some people to set clear boundaries with family and family members can be something that is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, maybe you're beautifying your home or you decide that you want to, you want to paint it, you realize like now's the time, it's now or never. Let's do it. We have the money, or, wanting to beautify the outside and plant flowers and stuff. Um, Especially if it's been something that you've been wanting to do for a long time. I think that this can definitely on a more like deeper internalized level. Sometimes Neptune in the fourth, especially if like your IC is in a late degree, but either way, Neptune in the fourth at 29, you can feel like you just want to retreat and you want to hide. You want to be in the house more, or you have to be for some reason. If you're doing any work on yourself, the fourth house is our roots and our private life. And so maybe you've been doing like inner child stuff, family stuff, reparenting work, on yourself or with a therapist. And maybe you reach some sort of critical point in that and have a major realization, with Neptune at 29 and Saturn kind of like making that Neptune transit so much more real. Um, Maybe you're deciding that you want to leave where you live. You don't like it. You thought you did,
Mm.
or you did for a long time. And it's sort of like, no, I want to go somewhere else. I want to make a new plan. Or maybe you're in the middle where you're feeling the inklings of that, confused. And then later you'll decide like, oh yeah, it's just because I wasn't happy. I don't feel like this is home anymore. So there's a lot of questioning, I think, of like, what is home? Who is home?
Mhm.
How do I want to show up with my family? Who do I need to set clear boundaries with? Maybe you're
Yeah,
dealing with sickness, people that are sick, um, mentally, physically, within your home or within your family, and you have to kind of like reprioritize, or there's a crisis or something, you have to make some changes.
definitely. And that Neptune in the fourth house, one of the things I can say that I've seen is like an increased sensitivity around family where you're sort of taking things too personally. And as it's getting to the end, I'm seeing more of like setting boundaries and not like taking things, everything on, like not thinking that
Mm.
everything is about you or everything is an attack toward you. Or this energy of being overly sensitive and obligating yourself to do too many things for your family, which is what you're talking about, like those boundaries. And so
Yeah.
it starts and then it gets like to this peak. And I've noticed like as we're getting to the end, things are starting to unravel and people are kind of coming back from going too far into the deep end.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Definitely like waking up one day feeling like and being like, oh my God, all of my time is taken up, or a lot of my free time. I'm giving it to like these family members that that need it, but they don't all need all that help just from me,
Yeah,
and kind of recognizing that, um, having that sort of epiphany and then making decisions from there.
definitely. And then Capricorn and Capricorn rising, this will be happening in the third house. What
In
does
the
that
third
look like?
So this can look like a lot of this can go a lot of different ways because the third house rules over so many things. But something that's more universal, or something that I find interesting, is the third house is the house of communication, how we communicate with others, how we process information. So with Neptune at 29 degrees in your third house, potentially you are realizing or realize that the way that you communicate like is not, you're not getting your point across in the way that you wish that, in the way that you want. And maybe you have to change your approach, or maybe the kinds of the people that you're talking to just like are not meant to hear, um, they're not good, not to say they're not good friends, but they just can't hear what you're saying for whatever reason. And so, yeah, making changes to how you communicate, I think can definitely be a major theme here. This can also be similar to like the ninth house almost, because the third house is sort of our beliefs on like a lower level, right? And
Yeah, like
so
our day-to-day
day
self-talk
to
and
day.
thoughts.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, whereas the ninth is more like bigger macro concepts, the third house is like how we narrate our days to ourselves inside our head, and how we think on a more sort of logical level. And so
Maybe you're
maybe you're
delusional about that conversation you had or that interaction that
right. Maybe you realize that you're like making things, you're being overly sensitive, in just daily conversation, and you're taking things very personally. And it's like, it's not helping me. Maybe I'm being delusional in how I'm sort of like replaying that in my head and back to myself. Could be issues that come up, or yeah, issues that come up with your siblings or your neighbors potentially, maybe you
Yeah.
reach some sort of critical point in how you relate or communicate with your sibling, with your sisters, with your cousins, about family, about them. Maybe you have to change course.
Yeah, definitely. And that third house is the house of learning,
Yes.
especially like learning new skills and things like that. So I feel like a lot of people who have this transit, and I know a couple who have this transit, who have been studying very deeply over the last like 14 years,
Mhm.
different forms of spirituality, different spiritual
Yeah.
practices. And so it could be kind of like coming to an end of that, like
Mhm.
dealing with the fact that, okay, I've learned everything that I learned and I got everything that I have gotten out of the situation. And now I need to let this go and move on to something different. And that could, in and of itself, be a little bit of a crisis because it's kind of like you've relied on this and this has been a thing in your life, like a big part of your life for so long. It could also be an energy around sharing those types of ideas and ideals with other
Mhm.
people because it's the house of like blogging and emails and, that type
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe you've been like sharing your spiritual knowledge online,
Mhm.
with your community, with and maybe you started working in like a spiritual job, or learning metaphysical practices. This has been a long transit of Neptune in your third house of education and
Yeah.
teaching, learning, taking in information and disseminating it. So yeah, right on the money with that. And maybe you've been doing that and doing it in the way that you wanted, but now you sort of are like, do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to learn something different? Which way do I want to go with this?
Yeah, definitely. And then for Aquarius and Aquarius rising, Neptune in the second house, which I'm sure is a welcome thing that it'll be moving on for a lot of
Yeah, I
those
was gonna
people.
say. Sounds like a pretty fun transit. Maybe there have been changes to how you make and spend and view money. Maybe there has been, through this Neptune transit, some financial fear or anxiety or insecurity. Um, Neptune moving through the second house, definitely, I would imagine, just being at 29 degrees could really open your eyes to any issues that you're having with your money, with how you save it, how you spend it, your
Or you don't
relationship to
save it.
it, or you don't
How
save
it
it.
flows through your,
Flows in and
and
flows
then it's
out.
gone.
Yeah. And Saturn, since last year or a little over last March, Saturn moving into the second house could have started this sort of like
Yeah.
process of like, hey, you're as soon as you make it, it burns a hole in your pocket and you're spending it. And so what's going on here? So Saturn and Neptune have been having this dance in your second house where it's like, I want to indulge and enjoy myself, but I have to be like a responsible adult in the world. And now you could have reached this sort of critical point um where you have to do something, maybe you decide that you want to get a financial advisor or start saving more or more professionally, like in stocks and bonds and get a portfolio or something, something's got to give, something's got to change.
And that's kind of like what we were talking about with the seventh house. I think for all of the houses, like if you're feeling confused and
Yeah.
you're not really sure what's going on, everything is nebulous, like with your
Mhm.
finances, then definitely find a third party, like hire a financial advisor, hire someone who can help you figure out if you can have the money for it, which you will. Neptune, the
Mhm.
money comes in when you need it. That's the
Sure.
thing with Neptune. It just kind of flows in and flows out. And like you're not knowing how this is happening, but it's happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so like get someone who can help you with that for sure. The other thing too is like forming a spiritual connection to your material possessions, your money,
Mhm.
the things that are tangible, where you're not
Right.
just viewing it like physically, but you're viewing it more energetically. And you're looking at this like this can actually be a tool. You can have definitely a spiritual connection to material items and material possessions. And that can be a really beautiful thing. And so it's not just about like earning money to pay bills and it's not just about like, money is like power and all this other stuff. It's like money is energy. And that's something that you could realize, during this transit and maybe utilize in some way.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like that's a concept that an Aquarius rising could like get behind,
Yeah.
could understand. um and also on a very, not everyone will experience this, but be careful of like with Neptune at 29, fraud, people trying to scam you out of your money,
Yeah.
fraud. Don't, my suggestion would be don't lend like a friend money right now. I don't, you want to just kind of be careful.
This is the final lesson about like not thinking clearly about your finances. And so
Right.
a lot of people will have that big final lesson if they haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just stay open, stay cognizant of that, and maybe just don't give it out, especially to friends. You know what? Yeah, exactly. Um, and then we have Pisces
Yeah.
rise.
Pisces and Pisces rising. Last but never least, this is happening in their sign. What does this look like?
I mean, Neptune moving through the first house has probably been a wild transit for Pisces risings. Um, I feel like Neptune in the first can bring literally like more than any, I think I maybe use this like word for other, this is an identity crisis
It is an
energy.
identity
Who am
crisis.
I? Who
Yeah.
am I? What do I want? How am I perceived? Do I want to be perceived? And that's so Piscean, like anyway, those questions, can come up for sure. But yeah, and you can reach sort of this critical point. Maybe you are finally, especially since Saturn moved into your first house,
Mhm.
um, and has gotten so close to Neptune, like maybe you are finally getting answers to that question, hopefully, and like the deconstructing and reconstructing of the self is like the vibe I get for, and the identity, like the how other people see you, how they view you, how you dress, how you present to the world, can all be really like shifting. Um, there can also be this desire, especially if your ascendant is at a later degree, like the degree of your ascendant, there can be a desire to disappear, to hide, to not be perceived, to pull back a little bit. That's not forever, but just kind of pulling back into the self. But more broadly, just with what's happening now with Neptune at 29 and Saturn there, yeah, it's like rebuilding of who you are and really questioning of like who am I, and how do people see me, and how do I want to be seen?
Definitely. I love that. And um, Pisces rising people in general, they tend to lose themselves in other people's energy. So they lose themselves in who they're around, in their surroundings, and all of that. And so they already tend to have a difficulty like figuring out who they are. And
Yeah.
that Neptune energy has just made it 10 times worse. I can't imagine being a teenager during
uh,
this time, having a Pisces rising. Like that must have been horrible. Because it's like, who the hell am I? And you think that you're this one person because you're in this crowd. And then
mm,
you realize you have this moment of disillusionment that you're not. And like it takes a long time for Pisces rising people very often to figure themselves out in that way. And so this Neptune is just making it 10 times harder. And so it's kind of like looking at this 29th degree, like where have you lost yourself in other things, other people, other identities that are not you? And how do you break out of that? How do you let that go so you can move on?
yeah, wow, that's really, really well put. And I think that you're right. And then other thing that I will add is, since it is kind of strengthening or amplifying those kind of qualities in Pisces risings, maybe you also have been feeling like people, because Pisces risings, like people project their stuff onto them,
Yeah.
they see Pisces risings as they want to be seen, or as that like I see a Pisces rising as I am, not as you are. So things get very confusing. And so maybe you've also been feeling that too, which can just add to the confusion of the identity. It's like, well, am I who I see myself as, or am I how you see me? And I think it's good news that sooner than later, Neptune will finally leave your first house. And I feel like there can be a little bit more of a feeling of being a bit more grounded in your identity and who you are, and knowing that a little bit more deeply, because it has been, especially, you're right, like if you're a kid, if you're younger and already kind of kids are confused, it could have felt like very head in the clouds, very um, disorienting.
Yeah, definitely. That is a very, very good point. So, yeah, I feel like we covered everyone really, really well.
Yeah, we
That
did.
is all the signs. This is a really good forecast. I really hope everybody listens to this, takes it to heart, re-listens to it over the next 2 years. You guys
Yes.
bookmark this and come back to it because you're going to want to, because you're going to forget some of these things. And then you're going to come back and be like, Zoe told me. Darn it.
Yeah, come back and watch. Yeah, I loved this. This was great. And I feel like it's cool because, as you said at the top of the video, like I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. So it's nice to give, people this information.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much. And where can people find you once again if they want to follow you, book a reading, all of that?
Yes, thank you. So I'm ZoFlow Astro on all platforms, on TikTok and Instagram. If you want to book a reading with me, I'm sure Heather will put the link to my website in the description, and that would be great. And yeah, follow me on TikTok and Instagram. I post almost every day different little astrology shots to get your day going.
All right, perfect. So follow Zoe, subscribe to this channel,
Yes.
like this, share it with your friends if you feel like they could benefit from the information we share with you today. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.